listening to the Astral Hour. I'm your host, Astral Meadow. Join me as we take a glimpse into the mysterious. Welcome, everyone. Today I am joined with my friend Rhea. She is a certified Reconnective healing foundational practitioner and has been practicing for 2 years. Her goal as a healer is to bring about a return to wholeness that is already within you. She uses Reconnective healing as a catalyst in healing the mind, body, and spirit, and also in reawakening of your DNA. Welcome to the show.
Hi.
Hi, and thanks for coming out.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, good. So my first question is, when did you first discover Reconnective healing? And what were some of the big things that were appealing to you?
So when I discovered Reconnective healing, it was kind of interesting because I was looking into the Mandela effect. And as most people do these days, I was getting a lot of my information from YouTube. Mm-hmm. So I was going through different videos and learning more Mandela effects. If you want to know more about the Mandela effect, you should just go look it up on the internet, because that's a whole other
rabbit
topic.
Hole.
Yeah. But as I was doing that, I came across this man on YouTube who had a channel called Everyday Masters. His name is Pace. And he did a video about the Mandela effect, and he was associating his experience with the Mandela effect with the reconnective healing frequencies. Because one of the things about reconnective healing is it's called reconnective healing because it's reconnecting strands and reconnecting strings is one of the things that you would read in Dr. Eric Pearl's book when you read his information and what he's been teaching about it. And so I watched that video and was very curious to learn more about reconnective healing after that. I could tell you more about his video, but really you should just go watch it. It's really interesting.
Okay.
So I started going down that rabbit hole, looking into reconnective healing and looking up Dr. Eric Pearl. He's all over YouTube, and there's also a website, of course. It's called The Reconnection. And I bought his book, and I read it. And as I was looking into it further, I started playing with the frequencies. I was actually able to put my hands up and feel the frequencies in my hands. And so I started playing with those. I started working on healing in my own body, and had some successes. Right. And I was really excited about that. I was keeping it to myself, though, because the environment I was in at the time was not very accepting of things that are out of the ordinary, I guess you might say. Mm-hmm. And so this was all very private study that I was looking into on my own without sharing with anybody, because I just knew that I was going to be called out as, working with Satan or something crazy like that. And anyways, that's where it all began. Mm-hmm. And what I really love about reconnective healing is that you don't have to learn a particular method or anything. You just feel for the energies, and you go where the energies take you. And you also don't have to have a client who believes in it for it to work. A lot of times the people who doubt it the most will see the biggest results. Right. So those are some of the things I really love about the reconnective healing.
Okay. If you could define it in your own words, like how would you explain it to somebody who has no idea, never heard of it?
I get this question a lot, what is reconnective healing? And I really tailor my answer to the person I'm talking to. Right. Which is another thing I really love about reconnective healing. It appeals to people from all different walks. We live in the Christian belt, so a lot of times I'm talking to Christians. And an easy way to explain it to a Christian is to say, reconnective healing is a prayer that is felt, not spoken.
I like that.
And then I'm also getting to know a lot more spiritually minded people. And so it's easy to explain to them, well, there are frequencies coming onto our planet, and we can use these frequencies if we connect to them, while also understanding that we are all connected to each other. So we receive those frequencies while acknowledging our connectedness, and therefore healing comes about.
Right.
And then for those who aren't spiritual and aren't Christian, but are more scientifically minded, it's energy. Everything is made up of energy, and we are able to learn how to harness that energy and frequencies to facilitate healing. And those who are more scientifically minded can get behind that.
Right.
So
you're really just kind of the middleman between the frequency and the person. Like you're just like pulling it in and sharing it with the person.
So it's not a sending, I'm receiving.
Okay.
But because you and I are connected, you are also receiving with me.
Okay. That's cool. Let's see here. Could you share with us a little background on Dr. Eric Pearl, like some of the stuff you learned by reading his book and what, inspired him and, I don't know, pushed him into this?
He has a really big story, and I couldn't possibly tell you all of it. But he is a chiropractor.
Uh-huh.
He's not a practicing chiropractor anymore because he does the reconnective healing. But he had a successful chiropractic practice for 12 years in LA. And then decided to go to the beach one day, just randomly. When he writes about it in his book, he kind of expresses how it was completely out of the ordinary for him to just up and go to the beach on this particular day. He just felt that's what he needed to do. So he did. And he comes across this woman on the beach reading tarot. And for fun, he decides to have his reading done. And while she's speaking with him, she tells him he's a healer. And he's like, well, I am a chiropractor. That makes sense. But then she tells him that he needs to be reconnected. And I don't remember if those are the exact words that she used, but it was something along those lines. And she gave him a brief explanation of what it was. And he kind of thought it was silly, but he kept pulling at him like he really needed to do this. And so he did. He went and had her, let her do this thing. Basically what she was saying is that, how we have the meridian lines on the earth. Well, once upon a time, we were all connected to those. And over time, the human race as a whole has become disconnected. So we're disconnected from the earth, the universe, and it's created a lot of problems in our energy. And that can also create a lot of the unwellness that some of us experience. So anyways, he went through this reconnecting, and he said he felt rested the first time. And it's a 2-day process. You go to 2 sessions. After the second session, it was a little bit more like it had a bigger impact on him, but he still just wasn't sure what was going on with all of it. He went home and found some odd things started happening. He walked into his living room area and the TV turned on by itself. He would go into the bedroom and the light would turn on by itself. And so just different things were happening. And then in his chiropractic practice, he started seeing that he would finish a chiropractic adjustment. And then he would say, okay, lay there with your eyes closed and just let the adjustment set in. And then while they were doing that, he would feel these energies in his hands, and he just started kind of moving his hands over and around the patient. And his patient started experiencing healings that had nothing to do with his chiropractic care. And this was happening, and he was like, okay, well, don't mention it to anybody. Which, of course, they went and told anybody they knew who needed a healing.
Right.
But then the other thing that started happening is over like a 3-month period of time, he had clients who were coming in, and it was like a channeled message started coming through. And I think he said it was like 50 patients in total came in, and when you combined all of the messages, there were a total of 6 messages, and I wrote them down because I knew I wouldn't remember them.
Okay.
Sorry for the noisy paper.
It's okay.
You must continue to do what you are doing. What you are doing is bringing light and information onto the planet. What you are doing is reconnecting strands. What you are doing is reconnecting strings. You must know that you are a master. We came because of your reputation. And so that's the messages that came through. So eventually, he finally gave in to this calling that he didn't understand why he was receiving it, because he wasn't a spiritual person.
Mm-hmm.
He enjoyed going out and having vodka and you know, all of the stuff that we like to partake in, and he didn't understand why he was being called to do this. But he finally followed his calling and started teaching others how to do it.
Okay. That's interesting. Has he ever like pondered or talked about where he thinks the information was coming from? Like, is this like his higher self, or I'm just curious if he ever like put 2 and 2 together about.
I think he did talk about where he thought it was coming from, but I honestly can't remember
Okay,
right now.
that's fine. I was just curious.
Like I said, there is so much information.
Uh-huh.
I would really recommend reading his book.
Okay.
It's called The Reconnection, Heal Yourself, Heal Others, I think is the name of the book. And it's Dr. Eric Pearl. And you can also go to his website.
Yeah, I watched a couple videos on him, and like one was just like a whole hour, and it was just focused on one chapter. It was like his mom's near-death experience as he was
Yes.
like being born.
Yes.
So it was really interesting. I definitely had chills like a lot of the times because we had just done my last episode was just death, the afterlife, and rebirth, and like as he was talking about like some of the spheres his mother kind of went through.
Yes.
I was like, oh my God, we just, you know, it was like, it just really confirms it. So every time I hear like a near death experience, I'm like, it's so wild to me how similar they all are and how they're all moving kind of through these different places. And
I listened to that too, and I loved how he explained that each near-death experience, while it's recognizable as being that, is still unique.
exactly, because it's through our lens.
Right. And so, you know, you may see you see a rose and you know it's a rose, but it's unique from every other rose.
Right.
You see a snowflake and you know it's a snowflake, but it's still unique from every other snowflake.
Right.
I thought that was a great way of putting it.
Right. Exactly. You know, I do a lot of art, and I used to teach a children's art class, and sometimes we would, like, there was a whole, you know, month where every time we would get together, we would work on this elephant. You know, they're practicing shading and just, you know, just drawing their own version. But it would always amaze me how different, even though they were looking at the exact same image, you know, but that's how I feel with the afterlife. It's just like, how can you draw that elephant? Like, it's going to look different because we all see it differently, and we all create it differently when we're like recreating something. So, all right. Could you kind of explain what a session with you is like and how it might be different from some of the other practitioners, the way that they do it?
Yeah. So we start a session with a conversation. A lot of times I haven't met the person before the session, and so I just give them an opportunity to ask me any questions that they have. I usually just ask them, how did they hear about Reconnective Healing? Once we've gotten all the introductions out of the way, I let them know what to expect in the session, which is I'm going to ask you to make yourself comfortable, preferably lay down, take your shoes off, in a dimly lit room. You know, because sometimes I'm doing them in person and sometimes it's a distance session. So a lot of times I have to give instruction on what kind of space they need to make for themselves.
Right.
Just somewhere where they're not going to be interrupted. And then I let them know you may experience a deep relaxation. You may even fall asleep. Or you may experience strong sensations, you know, movements of the eyes or even your body. you can, you know, there's a variety of things that could happen. Just allow yourself to enjoy it. Release all your expectations and just allow yourself to enjoy whatever comes. When the session is over, I'm going to put my hand on your shoulder to let you know. And I ask that you stay in your place that you're at. And if I'm not with you, then I'll ask you to set a timer and call me when your timer goes off. And then I will ask you a series of questions to learn and take notes about what your experience was so that you can look at them later. I always try to tell people to stay where they were, because coming out of a reconnective healing session is like coming out of a dream. I don't know if you've experienced this, but the moment you get up out of bed and you start walking away, that dream just starts to leave immediately. Mm-hmm. But as you're laying there, if you haven't moved, you can remember more of the dream. So I like to ask those questions while you're still in that same space to hopefully get more information. The questions sound a little repetitive, but it's kind of like whenever you're asking somebody if they're okay, you ask them the third time, and that's finally when they'll let you know how they're really feeling.
Right.
So the questions are, what did you observe? What did you notice? And what did you experience? And so each question just lets us delve a little deeper into the overall experience that you had. So that's the normal process. Normally it ends at that point. But what I have found through my reconnective healing sessions that I have conducted is that I receive a lot of information myself during the session. Because as I mentioned before, I am receiving the frequencies and sharing them with my client. I'm not just sending something.
Right.
And so I receive images. Typically it's images. I'm open to possibly receiving words. I haven't had that happen yet, but I anticipate it will. And so, for example, may I use your experience?
Yeah, totally.
So you mentioned that you felt like you were floating on water at one point. And I immediately was like, oh, that explains why I saw light shimmering on water.
Right.
Because whenever I saw it, I was like, well, I've never seen that before. Why is that there? And it just kind of, I think it gives you validation for your experience.
Right.
To hear that I saw the light shimmering on water.
Right.
And then for another person, I saw a figure, and the figure was very tall, very broad. It looked massive, and it was human figure. The head reached the ceiling, and I remember thinking, oh, that's just me. And then I went to open my laptop after the session was over to take notes from their experience, and the time was 5:55 p.m. And I am a believer there's no coincidences, and I was like, I've got to look up what that angel number meaning is.
Right.
So I look up the meaning for angel number 555, and it says, your angels are with you. And I immediately knew that she had a very just wonderful angel there with her, protecting her, which was very important to her because of some of her past experiences, to know that she's got an angel there to look after and take care of her.
Right. So, that's beautiful.
So those are just some of the experiences. So I guess that's what makes it different with me, is beyond the normal reconnective healing session, I might get some downloads of my own that I can share with you. And I'm not saying that others don't do that. That's just not part of the training. That's just something that comes naturally to me, and I'm happy to share with my clients.
Right. That's beautiful. Yeah, I had this Akashic record reading one time, and some of my spirit guides showed up, and she was trying to explain this one, and she's like, it's huge, she's like, it's big, it kind of looks like a transformer, So it's interesting because we always think about angels or these spirit guides looking a certain way, but sometimes they might appear to be giant, and sometimes they might kind of morph while you're looking at them, they might completely shift form. It's just they appear how like how you're ready to receive them at that time. So maybe there was a reason why it was so big, because it caught your attention. It wasn't just some like a little bit of light. It was like, whoa, like
Yeah.
I see you.
I remember my first response whenever I saw this form in front of me. I got a little giddy and I was like, oh my gosh, you're here.
Yeah.
And then I was like, what is going on with me?
Right.
So, that was really neat. I hadn't had that experience before. So, I love that I get to share in my clients' experiences. So,
Awesome. I love that. How has reconnective healing benefited you personally?
oh, wow. My life is completely different than it was when I discovered reconnective healing. I mentioned I wasn't in a very receptive environment to talk about reconnective healing or even the Mandela effect whenever I first discovered all of this. So I was very quietly studying and listening and learning on my own.
Right.
And during that time, I also started learning about setting intentions and creating my own reality. So through learning about reconnective healing and working with the frequencies, I basically ended up out of a long-term toxic relationship. Became a single mom of 4 children, if that's not scary enough. I made the decision to get on a plane by myself and go to California to become a certified reconnective healing practitioner on a credit card. I just knew I had to do it.
Right.
And my finances were so strapped that I had made the decision when I got there, I would eat just 1 meal a day because I had done intermittent fasting, so I knew I could manage that. And that I would keep it as cheap as possible. And unless I manifested a meal being gifted to me. And it was so funny because I was there in the hotel, and we went through to the dining area, and a friend of mine that I'd made while we were there, we had decided we were going to share a pizza because that was the cheapest thing that was available. And by sharing it, we were going to save even more money.
Right.
And there was a group of people there, some ladies, and they had a table packed full of food. I couldn't imagine how they were going to eat it all. So it was hard not to comment about, oh my gosh, look at that. It looks delicious, I didn't actually say anything. My companion did. And the people were really nice, and they were like, oh, you should take some. We didn't realize what we were ordering, and it's huge. We can't eat all of this. And there was a lot of meat. They had Wagyu beef steak with the bone-in handle, what I mean? Like the cowboy steak. Huge, beautiful. And my friend is a vegetarian. She's like, oh, I'm a vegetarian. I'm sorry, I don't eat meat. And I piped up and I was like, I do. And they were like, oh, and I was like, can I just have a bite? And they were like, sure. And I tried it, and oh, it was delicious. And I was like, oh, thank you so much. And they're like, take one. They wanted me to take an entire steak. Wow. I said, oh, I couldn't possibly. They're like, if you don't take it, it's going to go to waste because we have nowhere to save it.
Right.
And I was like, well, I can't just let it go to waste. So not only did they give me this big, huge, beautiful steak, but then they were like, hey, we got more sides than we can eat too. Here, have some potatoes and have some Brussels sprouts and all of my favorite things. So all I ended up having to buy for myself was a glass of wine to go with that beautiful steak. And I got the menu out because I was just curious to see how much money I would have spent on this meal if I bought it for myself. The steak alone was $100.
Oh my goodness.
And I attribute that really to manifesting and working with the frequencies. I could have never made that happen on my own.
Right.
So that was just one really great experience. I'm not even sure how I got to that conversation. I apologize.
It's totally cool. Have you noticed any physical changes in your body?
Oh, yes. That's why I got there. I was answering that question. Absolutely. So I was having horrible back pain in my upper back, so much so that in order to get out of the bed, I literally had to roll over on my side and push myself up with my arms. And after my first reconnective healing session, that pain was completely gone.
Wow.
I woke up the next morning, I sat up in bed, and I was amazed that I had just sat up without having to use my arms to assist me. I didn't roll over or anything. I just sat right up in bed, and I was like, oh my gosh.
Wow.
And then I had residual lower back pain, which made it to where I couldn't lay flat on my back with my legs down. I would have to put a pillow under my knees. So when I would have a reconnective healing session, I would always have them put a pillow under my knees because if I didn't, it would cause low back pain. When I started going to the training, we practiced on each other. And after one of my reconnective healing sessions during the training, I came out of it not needing the pillow under my knees anymore. Wow. It healed my lower back pain.
That's
so that
awesome.
was gone completely. So those are the two big physical changes that I noticed. So yeah, what's really great about reconnective healing is it can heal you in your physicality, but it can also heal you relationships or finances even.
Right.
It just brings healing to you where you need it most. That's one of the things I point out to people whenever I do a session. I say, did you notice I didn't ask you what you're here for?
Right.
And the reason I don't ask is because the healing will go where it's most needed.
Right.
So I had one person come to me after they heard about my back healing, hoping that they would have healing in their back. And while they did see an improvement in their back, it did not completely heal. And they were disappointed about that. But shortly later, through some really odd coincidences, they discovered that there was mold in their house. And through that discovery, they were able to get into a program that their city offered to clean it up, basically. And they had been having reoccurring, unexplained sinus infections.
Right.
And so while their back pain wasn't gone, this mold problem got resolved.
Right.
So, and a lot of times when that sort of thing happens, I recommend going ahead and having another session or two. And, you know, as I didn't experience a complete healing the first session,
right,
I did experience additional healing after I had another session.
Right.
So, and that happens sometimes too. And the healing frequencies don't leave you once you get started. They continue to work with you. And so you may experience healing later.
Right, over time, or like
and it can come in different ways. So like maybe you're wearing the wrong shoes and that's what's causing your back pain.
Right. So and maybe you don't even ended up associating it with reconnective healing, but you made some kind of shift.
Yeah. And so maybe you end up doing something, those shoes get destroyed or lost, and you have to buy a different pair of shoes, and you just so happen to buy this one pair of shoes that's perfect, and now your back pain's gone. You know, it could be anything like that. So.
Right, because there's a lot of things that cause us physical problems that maybe is like environmental, you know, so like the mold, you know, that wasn't something that you could heal within because that person was living in mold. So like even if you healed one thing, like they were going to continue to be exposed. So that's the thing. I can get that with the shoes. It's because, you know, you can heal at the back, but it doesn't matter if they keep wearing the shoes.
Exactly. Because it's going to reoccur.
Right. Yeah. I've been like trying to be observant on what I've experienced since then. Obviously later I'll read, like what I experienced as you were doing the healing for everybody. But, I've been like attracting people to me. So I feel like the frequency like opened up something. And I went back and reread it before you got here. And like at the end, it was like I felt like I had been standing at a gateway for a while. And it was like something shifted and I finally walked through it. And that was how I ended my conversation with you. And then I forgot about it or whatever. I haven't really thought about it since then. But then I was trying to think, like, what has shifted? And I'm like, I feel like so many people have been coming to me that, and some of them I don't even know. And they're straight up like, I think I had a past life with you. To the point where I'm just like, this can't be coincidence that this many people, you know what I mean, are finding me now. So I almost feel like it shifted me and like, I don't know, it's like it's pulling people towards me, you know, that I'm supposed to find. Maybe I'm supposed, you know, to share this with them. You know, maybe they're supposed to listen to this podcast and like learn about it for themselves. Or I can't tell you why I'm meeting these people right now, but obviously there's a shift that's happened, you
Right.
know? So it's been kind of mind blowing, just the amount that I'm attracting towards myself now. Like there's like a magnetism or something.
That's wonderful. I
Yeah.
always love hearing people's stories about how their lives are changing
Mm-hmm.
after reconnective healing. It's amazing. You know, you're attracting more people into your experience that are adding to your experience,
Right.
and that you can add to their experience. I've seen others; they've had healing in their marriages.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've seen others who've healed from traumatic events that occurred that
Mm-hmm.
were really because of the traumatic events, it was causing a lot of interference with their life
Right.
in the present, and they were able to heal enough to get past that and enjoy the things that we all take for granted that
Right.
they weren't able to enjoy for a long time.
Yeah, I was. I guess I didn't talk to Justin recently, but I think it's been about a week back. He had something that kind of triggered him, and normally it would really hit him harder. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
something that we've dealt with for a little while. Like this thing, every time it comes up, it's really emotional,
Mm-hmm.
and like it came up and like he just started like talking through it, and like it didn't trigger like anger or sadness. And like at the end, he was like, I feel like I just did really well, with this, And so like
And
earlier when I was thinking about it, like how he's shifted, I was like, I bet that's what it was.
oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah. It's so weird because you don't know, like it's like if you don't really sit down and almost meditate like a couple weeks out after
Mm-hmm.
you have it, you might not notice it. So that's kind of like when I started working with the homeopathy is
Mm-hmm.
like, because it kind of works on like the whole being. And so I was like, I'm working on my hormones, but then I suddenly started being able to communicate really well, like where
Uh-huh.
I had been like really reserved. And like I started thinking about it, I'm like, what has shifted? And I'm like, oh, well, I've been doing homeopathy, and
Uh-huh.
it works on your whole self. So I'm like, maybe it was like healing this block and then it just heals this other thing. I don't know, but it was like healing parts of me that I wasn't expecting,
Mm-hmm.
and it really kind of blew my mind. I'm like, but something had to have shifted, like you don't just go from being super introverted and shy to starting a podcast. So
Right.
I was like, I don't know, it's just like it put me on like the path, that I was supposed to be on. It aligned me, and I feel like reconnecting healing is similar because it's working on the energy body
Mm-hmm.
and like aligning you to your natural frequency, and that's
Yes.
like we all have, it's like we're born into this frequency, but then there's these things that affect it, like, alcohol or trauma or whatever, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
lowering it. Or like I have this book and it's just all about energy healing, and it has like pictures of like holes, like
Mm-hmm.
when the aura has like a hole in it, and then it's like draining and like all the stuff's coming in that shouldn't, and things are leaving that that should be kept in. And so I think about like with reconnecting healing, like it's kind of going in there like with the strands,
Mm-hmm.
and it's kind of like mending, maybe holes for somebody, or maybe it's like almost like a wound or something that's been like overexerted. And
Mm-hmm.
so I kind of visualize that when I think about it now.
I think of the like strands in a tapestry or the fibers in our muscle,
Mm-hmm.
and I see them torn and frayed,
Right.
and I see reconnective healing as mending those
Mm-hmm.
and reconnecting those strands and smoothing the frays, and that's the way I envision it whenever
Right.
I try to picture it in my mind.
Right. A tapestry is a good example of that,
Mm-hmm.
and over time a tapestry is going to be worn out.
Mm-hmm.
It might start fading, because it's like in the sun or whatever. It might have a rip or a stain or whatever. So it's
Mm-hmm.
just like it's like restoring it back to its original self.
And something I don't talk about very often with reconnective healing is there's actually been scientific research that Dr. Eric Pearl has had done,
Mm-hmm.
and they've actually discovered that there's genuine healing that's occurring with the DNA
Right.
itself.
And like the tissues. I was watching a video and he was talking about like it was like 2 minutes of reconnective healing. Like it wasn't even the full 30 minutes.
Right.
And like they would look at the tissues afterwards and like they had started basically like regenerating or something. Like it was just
Yes.
it was just the catalyst that was needed. And it's interesting that he's a chiropractor, and because I imagine chiropractic work being similar in that all it's doing is like resetting, and then, you know, we all have this innate ability to heal.
Right.
You know, when we get a cut, our body mends it, you know, and so I don't know. It's funny that he wasn't spiritual or anything. And there's a lot of chiropractors that aren't, and they don't look at it like, when I think of the spine, I think of the chakras and the energy that moves
Right.
up it, but they don't. A lot of them don't. So I think about it's similar to reconnective healing, you know, it's because it's like putting your body back into place and then it heals itself.
Right.
You know, so
He likes to say, experience the wholeness that is already you.
right.
Because you're already whole.
Mm-hmm.
We're just going to help bring that experience to you.
Right. Something might just have like gotten in the way,
Yeah.
you know. So that's interesting. What are some of the experiences your clients have shared with you after a healing session?
One of my favorite stories was I did a distance session for somebody, and this was the biggest distance I had done.
Mm-hmm.
And she's actually somebody I met when I went to the Reconnective healing to get trained.
Mm-hmm.
And we were staying in touch, and she asked me, she was like, will you please do a session for me? She had recovered from breast cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, as any breast cancer survivor does, she had regular checkups, and she went for a checkup and they found a lump. And they were going to do a biopsy just to make sure that, you know, if it was cancerous or not, see if she had to do another round of, you know, treatment. She really didn't want it to be cancerous. And so she said, please, will you do a session for me? I just want it to come back negative. And I said, absolutely. And we basically traded sessions.
Right.
She did a session for me. I did a session for her. And so I was waiting to hear the news and hoping that it was going to be negative. Because as I mentioned before, with reconnective healing, you get the healing where you need it most.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's no guarantee that you're going to get what you're hoping for. So anyways, I heard back from her a lot faster than I thought I would, because normally they have to send it off for biopsy and get their test results.
Mm-hmm.
But she contacted me the next day, and she said she went in, they put her in her gown, they had her put her arm up, got the ultrasound out so they could, you know, make sure they had the right location before they did the biopsy.
Mm-hmm.
And then the lump was gone.
Wow.
And so she's like, there was no biopsy because there's no lump anymore. She's
Wow.
completely gone.
That's beautiful.
That was one of my favorite stories. I was so excited to hear that. A lot of people, you know, they experience healing in their relationships.
Mm-hmm.
I love hearing about those. I get calls sometimes. They're like, oh my gosh, this happened. And normally this would happen whenever that happens, and that didn't happen.
Right. Right.
And so it's just so rewarding to know that I've been able to act as a catalyst in their lives and bring about a change that is, you know, enriching their lives and making it better. So.
Right. Right. And I think about, you know, people that just want to kind of mock us, like for these different healing modalities and like, oh, it's psychosomatic. But like, if this woman's tumor just like dissolved, basically, like, I don't care
Right.
if that's psychosomatic. Like, I watched this, it was like on a Greg Braden, like documentary that he had. And this is the power of the mind, okay? This woman had went all over. She had like a huge tumor. I think it was on her liver or something. And there was literally like nothing that they could do.
Mm-hmm.
And they had like this ultrasound on her, okay? And so these healers, like this, you know, it's like her last option.
Mm-hmm.
And you're looking at the screen and seeing the ultrasound. And they're chanting. I think... I don't know.
I know this story.
Yeah, I don't know what language it was, but they're basically were focused on it's already healed. It's already healed, but they're saying it in a different language. And I'm literally watching the screen, and you can physically, I've got chills, see the tumor
Yes.
freaking disappear. And this woman was going to be left for dead. Like the doctors couldn't do anymore.
Yep.
Like they were like, you'll die, if we remove this. So
Right.
yeah, it's just, I don't care if that's psychosomatic. Like, look how beautiful the
That's-
mind is if that's what it is. It doesn't
Exactly.
matter. Then it doesn't matter. Like if they're making it up.
And again, that goes back to the scientifically minded.
Right.
That's fine. If you want to attribute it to this being the mind and the mind doing it,
Right.
okay, that's what the mind's capable of.
Right. If that's how you visualize it, And that everyone, like that's what we were talking about earlier. Like everyone creates things differently. So in their mind, when they recreate it, they have to recreate it scientifically because they're a technically minded person, which is fine. Like we need those types of people too. Like all the different personalities bring like these different things in.
I love Case's version of his idea around all of that. Case is from Everyday Masters I was telling you about on YouTube earlier. He brings the Mandela effect into it by saying that he brings in string theory.
Okay.
And string theory basically says that there are different realities all existing at the same time.
Right.
And they're connected by strings that are kind of like vibrating. And so that's how he associates the part where it said you're reconnecting strings.
Right.
And basically what he was saying is when we experience the Mandela effect, we're basically able to, his idea is that we're basically able to see two realities at the same time.
Right.
So we have the knowing of this reality, but the existence of this reality.
Right. And it's almost like we have more of a choice.
Right. And he said what he believes we're learning to do is see the different realities and then choose the one that suits us best and vibrate at that reality.
Right.
So he would look at the woman with the healing of that large tumor and say, there was a reality that existed where that tumor wasn't there, and she simply chose to move into that reality.
Yeah, I just got chilled. Exactly. I can totally see that. It makes a lot of sense. And then just one of the videos I watched earlier was talking about reconnective healing. It's like it's a quantum level healing. So it's really beyond time and space. And so that really like stuff like parallel realities could totally be a part of that because it's going to heal you in these, maybe like ways that you didn't even realize are possible. And like, that's when it's like continuing to heal. Yes. But I like to think that it's also going back in time, and healing that too. And so maybe like, it's like emotional or something because it's like healing some childhood thing. And, so you don't really know what happened because it was like, I don't know. It's like wasn't necessarily affecting you as an adult the same way it did when it might have occurred as a child.
It's funny you say that because, I mentioned to you that I see things often. And so when I do a distance session, a lot of times I will envision the person that I'm working on. And I've had it come up during distance sessions where I'll be envisioning a man, for example, because I'm working with a man. And then during the session, suddenly the man turns into a boy. And now I'm working on this boy. I had another session where the man turned into an infant. You know about that one.
Yeah, I know about that one.
And it's really neat because then I'm working with this child or this baby. And I don't know what happened in this child's life or this infant's life that needed healing, but apparently it did. And I get to work with that. And it's really rewarding in its own way, just to know that I'm getting to go back in time and fix something broken,
Right. That's so fascinating to me. Like, I've been studying my astrology chart, and because of my placements, like in the 12th house and then in the first house, there was a lot that occurred in the womb, that like affected the rest of my life. So there was issues like before I could even process it that were occurring. And so I think about it like when I do some of these quantum level healings, like it is going all the way back, And then when I look even more into my astrology chart, it actually like shows up that like all of the stuff that was traumatic or toxic was in my childhood, and that I was always going to evolve out of it. I was always going to heal it, and I was always going to transition into this like healthy adult, and I was going to learn from it. But it's just so interesting because that's sort of the quantum thing. It's like it went all the way back. I can look at my chart and see that it was my like destiny to do these healings, you know? So I was always going to find them, it was always part of the path. I don't know. It's just really cool to think about the depth of it.
Oh, I find it exciting. It's
Yes.
just really, I don't know, it's invigorating to me. I get so excited about talking with people about their experiences and their history and their healings, and it's just phenomenal to me. I love it.
I know. I mean, I literally like a huge part of my podcast is just healing because I'm just blown away all the time. Like when I study these different modalities and hear these stories, and I'm like I want to share that with the whole world. I want everyone to see these examples, and everyone is going to be called to what they're supposed. So some people it might be different. Maybe like not everyone's into Akashic records because that might go against their belief system. So that's fine. So they might be interested in a different kind of healing, but at the end of the day, I do feel like there is, one just, that you're supposed to focus on, and it'll find you like exactly when you're ready for it, and it'll change your whole life,
Yes.
So I love it. So we talk about, how long like do the benefits last? Well, I guess we already like quantumly, since it goes like beyond.
It's like from what I've experienced and from what I've heard from others, it's typically lifelong.
Right.
So I'm not concerned at all about my back pain coming back.
Right. So unless there was like a new thing, like unless you fell down the stairs,
Right.
then you might need another session because it would be a new wound.
Or if I was wearing the wrong shoes.
Right. Yeah.
If I kept wearing the wrong shoes, then yeah, I might bring that pain back.
Right.
And that's another thing with reconnective healing that I like is it's not like chiropractic care where you have to keep coming back over and over again. Dr. Eric Pearl recommends up to 3 sessions. And after that, the healing frequencies will just continue to work with you, and you should just let them do that.
Right.
If you, however, experience a new event that brings on something new that needs healing,
Right.
then you can come back for another session if you'd like.
Right.
But if there's nothing new, then the frequencies are there and they're working with you, and you just need to trust the process and let it happen.
Right.
So it's not something you're going to keep forking out money for because you didn't get the healing the first time, So, but as a practitioner, if somebody came back to me wanting a 4th session, I would advise against it and say, no, you need to wait and let it work.
Part of
with you.
your healing is working on your patience.
Right. I like to give people the opportunity to try to feel the frequencies for themselves. So may I tell people how they can
Oh,
try?
totally.
Okay. So take your hands and place them out as though you're about to pick up a small child. So firm, but not so firm you're going to crush the baby, right? And then envision a string or a rubber band that's attached to both palms. Like there's a little hook on each palm, and there's a band there. And feel it pulling, and then just move your hands ever so slowly and see if you feel any sensation. You may feel a tingling. You may feel warmth or coolness in your hands. You may feel a sudden, almost like air moving through your hands when there's really any air moving. You may smell a smell.
I feel like my hands just got clammy.
Your hands just got clammy.
Like, but they're not even touching each other. So
right?
There's definitely a temperature shift that just happened.
So I've worked with people, and sometimes I'll be like, well, if one's hand's warm and one's cold,
Right.
Everybody has their own experience. You feel different things. Some people feel nothing at all. They're like, I don't know what you're talking about. This is nonsense. So that's how I began playing with the frequencies. I just did that, and I immediately felt a tingling in my hands.
Yeah, as soon as I put my hands out, I felt that like this buzzy feeling.
Yeah. And I've worked with the frequencies enough that now as I do a healing session with somebody, I can feel the sensation move into my scalp and then eventually into like my entire head. And I've done some sessions on myself because that's whenever you learn how to do the reconnective healing, they also teach you how to work on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really neat. I almost feel like I'm floating.
Mm-hmm.
My entire body it's like I know I'm on the bed, but I don't feel like I'm on the bed.
Right.
It's like more of a knowing than a feeling. I feel like I'm above it. It's really
Right.
neat.
Yeah. When I read my experience later, I had something similar happen to me. So where I was just like kind of above and not fully like integrated in. So yeah. So how is a distance session a little bit like different than the in person? Does it work the same or?
It works just as well.
Mm-hmm.
In my experience, and some of the others I've heard about, sometimes it's even better.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like when you do a distance session, you're removing some of the distraction.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not looking at my client looking for indications that they're having a good experience.
Right.
Because whenever I have a client in front of me, I'm looking at like, is there any eye movement?
Mm-hmm.
Is there any twitching? Just checking to see. And sometimes, even though you try to tell yourself not to do this, when you don't see any like visible things happening, you're like, are they feeling anything at all?
Right. The doubt starts creeping in.
Right.
And,
And so that's something that when I'm in person, I have to push away.
mm-hmm.
So that's a little bit of a distraction. And then for the client, they hear me moving around and,
Mm-hmm.
you know, just having another person in the room can be a distraction.
Right.
So when we do a distance session, it removes those little extra distractions. And I feel like it increases the experience, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I've had more visions from distance sessions
Mm-hmm.
that I'm able to share with my client. And the clients express a lot of times that they've had some really great experiences themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of anything specific to go into right now. Which was funny though, because between you and your husband,
Right. He had a distance session and I had the in person.
his distance session was less impactful to him as it was happening than your in-person session was.
Right. But he had more of a very noticeable change where mine was more energetic.
Yes.
So his was like, we could actually see it.
Oh.
So that's like, because he shifted how his response was.
Yeah.
Where I had to really dig to try to figure out what has shifted,
Right.
like
Yeah.
something shifted. Like immediately after, I felt amazing,
Mm-hmm.
So I was like not having any anxiety and just kind of felt, I guess, like high on life or something, like just really buzzy and like smiling and
At ease.
yeah, yes, I felt a lot of peace. But then life happens and I'm like, well, I guess I'm not peaceful all the time. I'm not just going to carry this thing forever, which I was kind of hoping I would, but obviously we still have other obstacles,
Something I'd like to recommend when you find yourself there
Mm-hmm.
is, how I just had you play with the frequencies with your hands.
Uh-huh.
Just start playing with the frequencies.
Right.
They have, in their studies that Dr. Eric Pearl has done,
Mm-hmm.
they have found that interacting with the reconnective healing frequencies is more impactful than meditation.
Interesting.
I can't remember the exact tools that they were using to measure,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a way that they're able to measure something, our light that we put out, basically.
Mm-hmm.
The light that a reconnective healing practitioner puts out
Mm-hmm.
is as much as the people who are sitting on top of a mountain practicing a lifelong goal of
Right.
achieving
Yeah.
I can't remember the terminology all of a sudden.
Right.
But those people that sit up on top of a mountain, meditate all the time, and
Right.
their entire life is just focused on achieving this calm and this balance.
Mm-hmm.
Reconnective healing practitioners achieve that so much faster just by working with these frequencies.
Right.
And so you can achieve a calming effect and dealing with the stressful things in life
Mm-hmm.
just by just getting your hands out and just like feeling for the frequencies. It calms you down. It helps you deal with situations a little more easily. I'm talking to myself here too.
Yeah.
Because I have to remind myself to do this. And when I do it, it works. I find myself in a stressful situation, and if I just take some time and I just start feeling with the frequencies, I immediately am able to get myself in a better mental place and in a better emotional place and handle the situation a lot better than if I don't take time to do that. And it's such an easy thing to do because your hands are always with you.
Right. Okay.
So
I'll start practicing with that more. I noticed the last ecstatic dance I went to was just this past weekend, and ecstatic dance is like there's no like set way that you move, but when I do it for whatever reason, like the way you're doing your hands, like I kind of like do that, and I'll work my hands up like over my head and then like move it around. But like after this ecstatic dance, I was like, I really feel like my energy just really shifted afterwards.
yeah.
So I'm like, I don't know, maybe it is like what I'm doing, like because it's just really intuitive how you move.
Yes.
You're hearing the music and it's like, well, how do I respond to this? And it's almost always I do things with my arms and hands. Like I don't usually just like I don't necessarily use my feet and legs as much sometimes. I'll get caught just in hand motion, like
I think a lot of people are working with the frequencies and feeling them without knowing that they're doing it.
right.
So there was one person in my life that I was really nervous about telling them what I do with Reconnective Healing because I'd known them all my life and knew their Christian background, and I just knew they were going to think I was working with Satan,
Right.
And so I went to try to explain it to him, and I said, well, I can feel a sensation in my hands, and I follow the energy. And I was trying to explain it to them. And to my surprise, they were like, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. And I was like, huh? And they were like, oh yeah, when I'm at church and I pray for people, my friends that I pray for, they're always surprised because I move my hand down their body and then I can feel where the problem is, and I just stop and I pray right there. And they're always like, how did you know? And she said, I could just feel it. And so I thought that was really neat to hear that basically she's working with the energy. And in the church, one of the things I like to say is that God is love,
Right.
and love is healing. And so, I don't know. It's just I really think we're all really more so on the same page than we think we are.
Right.
We're just using different words.
Oh yeah, I totally agree with that.
So, I talk about the energies and source, the source of the energies,
Right.
and that's just the same thing that they're saying, when they say God, or some say Allah, or, whatever term you want to use, universe,
Right.
just pick whatever term you like. That's one of the things I loved about Dr. Eric Pearl whenever I heard him talk is he said, God, love, the universe, pick a name you like.
Right, right.
He's like, whatever you want to call it, we're working with that.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting how like it kind of came to him. But when you talk about it, like it's like we're all one and like the collective. So like as these ideas integrated into his mind and these things were finding him, it makes me think that it was happening to all of us. Like it was like almost like it was like a gift and it was coming down, and he just happened, to really notice it and like give it a title and say, I'm going to teach this. But like the fact that I'm like just happen to be doing that while I'm dancing and other people are doing it while they're praying. And it's like, it's because like it was a gift given to us, but he just happened, to be more in tune with it to say, okay, I need to call this something so that people can learn and actually, spread it around and heal each other with it. So
Right. Well, and he originally came to him through the tarot reader.
Right.
So I actually got to meet her at the training, which was a really big treat because it was the first time she'd actually come to one of the trainings to say hi to everybody. And it was really neat to meet this little I don't want to say anything that would be like inaccurate, but she kind of made me think like a little gypsy lady, you know.
Right.
She was so awesome. It was neat. But yeah, that's where it came to him,
Right.
you know, like through this unexpected source, this lady on the beach, you know,
Right.
reading tarot. So I thought that was really neat.
Right. Awesome. Okay, so we're coming towards the end. So I was going to read what we observed at the end of my session for everyone so they can kind of see how I experienced it.
Okay.
So my husband had a totally different experience. I practice like mystical meditation. I have lots of visual, like when I close my eyes, I always see things. I don't ever just see black. So
Same.
as soon as I laid down, I went into my typical meditation. But then, you know, as you were working on me, it started shifting, and there was some new things that I had felt that I hadn't experienced just in meditation. So, okay, so I'm just gonna straight read this. This is what I observed. So, when I first laid down, I started seeing mandalas, like a kaleidoscope with shapes. I started feeling things in my body more. Like anything I had an issue with started aching, and then it stopped. I kept hearing sounds in my head, like Radiohead. I remember this, it was like, ooh, no, 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 no. It was like, it really was like a frequency. And, you know, Radiohead like plays with all sorts of really weird sounds. So that's funny. Yeah. At one point, the center of my chest made this weird Iron Man like sound, like, and then I felt that my heart was outside of my chest and above me. It was like it was being worked on and then put back in. At one point, I felt like you set a crystal on me. I wondered what you had set there. Then it went into me. So this was like right into my solar plexus. Like it was very much the same weight as, you know, a typical crystal you would put in your pocket. Mm-hmm. But it was like I absorbed it once it was sitting there. It was a very wild thing. And I'm still trying to figure out what that, like what happened there. Let's see. At one point, I felt like I was on a float, like I was on water. Sometimes I could hear sounds in my ears, but then it was taken away and it was like I was deaf. So yeah, it was like complete. And it's weird because silence tends to have a sound, like you hear the buzzing, but it was almost like even that faded.
Wow.
You know, it was like just complete true silence. At one point, I could still feel my astral body above me. I could feel the cord was connected, but I was very much above myself in the air. So that's similar to kind of how you described, like it was like this out of body experience. So, and then you asked me what I noticed, and I said, in the beginning, I was very aware of the veins in my arms. Like I could feel my veins. Sometimes I would get really warm feelings, and then I would get really cold. And then my experience was I definitely felt like there was some kind of threshold that I walked through. Like I had been at this gate for a long while, but I finally walked through it, almost like an initiation, like it was another layer. So the threshold part, you know, really triggered me today because I'm like, I really do think that something happened. Like when we did it to where when I walked through, it was like I opened up some kind of like portal. And that's why people are, you know, finding me. That I don't know how people find me sometimes. Like I really don't. But I'm like, I'm gonna attract like the right people in now, you know. All right. So we're coming to a close now. Could you take a minute to share with our audience how to get in touch with you?
Yes, you can call me at 865-314-7702.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can send me an email at easeandflowwithRhea@gmail.com. And that's spelled out EASENFLOWWRHEA@gmail.com.
Okay. And I will put that in the comments when I post this on my Instagram and Facebook so people can find you pretty easily. So
awesome.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show and coming out again. It's so nice to see you.
It's so nice to see you. I always love getting to sit down and have a talk with you.
I know. We could talk for hours, and we do. So.
Yes, we do.
But I love it.
We planned for an hour, and then we end up doing, 3 or 4?
I know. Well,
It's great though. I'm so
Yeah.
glad to have a new friend.
Yes, me too. I love it so much. So thank you. And thank you all for listening. Tune in next week on Astral Hour. See you later.